Today's edition of the Spotrac podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com right now. Use code Spotrac, SPOTRAC at registration. Get yourself $20 on the house and get cracking on those Super Bowl bets. That's code Spotrac at bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Friday, January 30th. A little delayed with recording today, but we're pending some news we got. The league has officially dropped its first range for the 2026 salary cap. That is the NFL, of course. And we're not too far off from where we've been since about October on Spotrac. The official range that clubs have been informed of as of this afternoon is between 301 and 305. And I can tell you right now, we were running at a 304.3 projection. We've now dropped that to 303.4 for those playing at home, which is exactly the midpoint of where the league has dropped that range onto us today. So 303.4 is what the views on Spotrac reflect now for the next couple of weeks. And then right around tag time, which is about Valentine's Day, we'll have an official number, official franchise tags and all the works and the tenders that go from there. So we're there. We're getting there. If you saw my post this week, important NFL dates, it begins February 9th, which is the day after the Super Bowl, the start of the waiver period, and continues on through July, right, when those franchise tag players will have a deadline to extend, and then we'll open up camp about a week later after that, and we'll be cranking on 2026. But full steam ahead for the offseason. I'm in the process right now of finalizing about 250 free agent descriptions and some quick analysis along with market evaluations for those players that we will be sending live shortly through the social networks and, of course, live on Spotrac.com. That's what's been baking behind the scenes a little bit here, along with, of course, a full slate of 32 teams now, live and official, through the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. So check out your favorite teams' off-season primer on Spotrac that includes cap space, draft picks, free agents, extension candidates, fifth-year option decisions, potential bubble players, how you can free up some cap space with some salary conversions in the works. So all 32 now live. And we've got some interesting tools to promote here coming soon, along with that free agent analysis piece. A roster manager tool. Go to your favorite team on Spotrac, click manage this roster. You can become the GM for a day or for an hour or for weeks. Make all the moves I just mentioned. You can trade, you can add free agents, you can draft, you can restructure, you can do what you need. And that's now available. It shows all the transactions you've made, all the cap information, all the updates, the ramifications, and you can take a snapshot of that and post it on socials and see how you do when the push comes to shove on March 11th. Same goes for our trade machine for the NFL, which is also now live. Trade draft picks, trade cash, retain salaries, trade players, the works. That's coming on March 11th as well. The tool is available now and is in 2026 mode. Trades can become official on March 11th, so you can start to armchair GM how those may look. And I believe we'll have a very hefty load of early March, mid-March trades as teams vie for cap space and for benefits and value to changing their roster quickly without having to go through the hoops of free agency or a draft player to fall in their lap at the right time. We're going to talk football and baseball with Dan Soemann right now. All right, Dan Soemann is here. Big news in the NFL. Not just that the salary cap projections are here and that we were at least in the ballpark, so don't have to do too much work, and our numbers aren't going to change too much in that regard. We may see some numbers change in Minnesota soon, Dan, because they decided on January 30th, pretty much in the heart of this offseason for them. They've been in offseason mode for quite some time here, that they decided to move on from Kwesi, their GM. Their kind of longtime GM who's done nice work. I think he had built a halfway decent mix of balance of draft picks versus free agency. He's responsible for some blockbuster trades in and out with that organization. And here we are on the precipice of February and the cusp of 2026 in the new league year. And he's out the door, and they don't have a replacement. They are basically just kind of patching this together internally through the draft, and then they will make an official hire after the draft per their team announcement, which means this was not exactly planned. And another reason to prove that this was not exactly planned is they gave him a contract extension last year. So they're going to buy him out essentially to make him go away to change the course of this franchise. So I'm going to spin it back to you right there. Why are we here, and what does this mean for the Minnesota Vikings, at least early on here in 2026?
I have absolutely no idea on the timing, why this all happened, or how we even got here, to be honest with you. It totally caught me off guard, that's for
You know,
sure.
Dan, it kind of feels a little bit like the reverse Buffalo Bills situation where the ownership kind of, they've been transparent here. They met with Kevin O'Connell, they met with the coaching staff, they met with some people. Maybe they brought in the Sportology company that's been kind of working with all these teams. And this was the decision they came to. It was a collective agreement that this was the move that needed to be made, which is similar to what happened in Buffalo, but obviously that was a coaching change and nothing else. You know, obviously they hired internally there. Nothing else really is going to change too much over the course of the next few weeks for the Buffalo executive decision group, at least. This is coming from the other angle, right? They felt like the current roster, to some degree, the decisions that have been made, and maybe the decisions that need to be made now on March 11th, shouldn't be in the hands of the previous GM who's been doing a lot of the work for a long time here. It's tough not to hang this on the quarterback stuff a little bit here, right? I mean, we're hot stove and everything. It's all speculation, but we can certainly speak from a roster construction standpoint as to what may be one or two, three leading factors for this decision. And of course, this starts with, you know, Daniel Jones having success in Indy after being on the Minnesota practice squad and they had as good a look as anybody that he had a chance to be a revival candidate. And obviously Sam Darnold last year, who took them 99% of the way, flamed out in the last hour. And the rest is Super Bowl 60 history here for Darnold and the Seahawks. And then, of course, it's J.J. McCarthy, his injury stuff. I don't know what else to say there. He's got a couple things going wrong there. And obviously the lack of production, the lack of development over the course of the last 2 years because of injuries and maybe because of the type of player that he is, at least right now in his stage of his career. Where are we with this, Dan? Is this a signal? Should we be flagging this as, hey, they may be one of those teams that is looking at quarterbacks in every direction over the course of the next few months here?
Yeah, I'd assume they fall into that bucket. That doesn't mean I think J.J. McCarthy's story is done there for what it's worth, but I mean, things aren't looking great, and it seems like Kevin O'Connell, who's notoriously good with quarterbacks, even seems kind of avoidant with the situation. Like they almost were hiding. I don't want to say they were faking injuries, but it
did
seems like
feel
they
like
were
it.
they
Yeah, the
were
slow play.
extending things to hide him, if you will. So
Yeah.
I'm not convinced he's in love with him personally. I just think draft capital, et cetera, they've invested too much to just outright walk away. But I think they're definitely
Yeah.
going to be in the market for getting their hands on somebody else in that room.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating dichotomy because there's no need to move on from McCarthy right now, and I don't think he has trade value. He might, and maybe that's one of the decisions that's being made behind the scenes right now is they're reaching out and wink, wink, what can we do here? But my guess, Dan, is that there's a lot more to this, that they've been pushing cap down the line. They've been acting like a contending team from a financial standpoint for quite a while now. Obviously, they paid Justin Jefferson. They paid a couple defensive players. They paid a left tackle. They paid a tight end. They didn't pay Sam Darnold, right? They didn't pay a couple secondary pieces that I think really took things sideways last year, specifically in terms of the defense. And, you know, I can understand getting to a point where you feel like you have to hold something accountable. I'm gonna guess you agree that this was the proper move, at least in this stage, right? We can debate about what happened last year with Darnold and Daniel Jones and et cetera, but right now, keeping Kevin O'Connell is the right move here, right?
Oh yeah, I don't think you would have moved on from him. I don't know if it's like the right move in a vacuum, as in like Kwesi had to go, as in like he made enough moves that like you were looking at that room and thought that the Vikings specifically needed to make a change. But if there wasn't any internal conflict on alignment, you know, like we've seen in Buffalo, there's the ownership can say whatever they want. They moved on from Sean McDermott because there was a clear divide between GM and coach on on roster personnel and alignment on that front. If that is the same thing in Minnesota, then certainly move on from one of the parts. And I have no issue keeping McConnell in the fold.
Let's continue
O'Connell, sorry.
Yeah, let's continue the hot stove stuff just a little bit more because it's fascinating. There's no question the quarterback stuff is involved here. To what degree, we won't know. We won't ever know. We may find out when we see some sort of transaction happen over the course of the next 3 months. But do you think it's deeper than that? Do you think that there were conversations being had about, are we going backwards and how far backwards should we go? You know, does that include Justin Jefferson being on the trade block, et cetera? It's perfectly plausible that this organization is at least having those conversations because they have been hemorrhaging money, pushing cap space, like I said, and acting like a team that, you know, should be getting 2-3 rounds deep in the playoffs and hasn't been now for a couple of years. So where do you think the conversations have gotten to in terms of the depth?
Oh, it's a fair criticism. And if you don't have the quarterback, lack of depth really, you know, shows its face in a lot of different aspects. So, yeah, it's a reasonable conversation that we might be into half step back territory here. And where you exactly direct the blame, it's always hard, but this time it's getting pointed at the GM for what it's worth. I mean, we know you have to assume the coach is involved with drafting a quarterback 10th overall. So it's always interesting to try and direct blame in these. I don't even want to say blame, but like direct responsibility in these circumstances.
I wish that in some capacity we could have the documentary about how that quarterback conversation went last year, because it's one of the most fascinating things we've experienced. We haven't seen a player like Darnold do what he's doing on this level multiple times now. Okay, he did it for Minnesota. Now he's doing it again for Seattle, obviously, which is it says more about Darnold than it does about anything else here. But to be a fly in the wall last year, this time of year, knowing what they knew about Darnold, having the bad taste in their mouths with Darnold, knowing the McCarthy stuff, they had to know that injury plus lack of development was sitting there, right? I mean, if Kevin O'Connell is as good of a quarterback coach, as good as an offensive mind as we believe he is, he had to at least know that this thing was not a ripened fruit, you know, ready to play full bore in 2025. And I think he was just fingers crossed, toes crossed at that point. But do you think that there was a pretty contentious back and forth there between sides? Maybe on a smaller scale to what happened in Buffalo and why they moved on from their coach.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. I mean, also zooming out, I mean, what was McCarthy, the 4th or 5th quarterback taken in that draft? I mean, 2 picks ahead of Michael Penix, who you want to talk about. We want the documentary after the fact.
Could be the exact same conversation happening, right?
Yeah, exactly. That whole draft class. So typically when you're the 5th, I just looked, 5th quarterback drafted in a specific draft, you know, it's typically for a reason. I don't care that it's 10th overall necessarily. So, yeah, there's probably a point of reckoning.
That's a good point. Yeah, they made it out to be a better class than it appears to be, at least early on, and we'll see what it gets to. But all right, quickly, because I'm running through their off-season piece again that I've had posted for a couple of weeks now, because you know they've been out of it for a couple of weeks now. They have an option decision on Jordan Addison. He's got the outfield stuff coming. He's obviously extension eligible, you know, for that kind of fringe WR2 player. He's been good. Okay, he's been good when healthy and available and not suspended and whatever. But what do you do with that? What do you do with your second wide receiver right now if you believe that your roster is in flux?
Yeah, it's tough. He seems talented. It's hard to know if that's, you know, backing off Justin Jefferson's success. Honestly, I'm going to punt on this one because I have no idea what to do or what they're going to do. And this is probably one of the first things the new GM is going to have to take a look at, though.
Okay. I mentioned the Jefferson stuff. I don't think it'll get there unless Jefferson wants it to get there. But I can tell you right now that the contract is tradable, that there's plenty of ways for this to work for both sides, and obviously bring in some sort of draft haul for the Minnesota Vikings if that's what they're hoping for. I'd push back and say if they don't have an actual GM in that seat right now, maybe they're not looking to be aggressive in this draft, right? Maybe they're looking to purge a little bit in intelligent ways, like Aaron Jones will fall off this roster, maybe Blake Cashman. I've got Javon Hargrave as a fringe player because of his age and his stature. So maybe it's just a matter of making the simple moves right now in March. And when the new person sits down in the seat and assesses this thing from A to Z, maybe some of these bigger conversations happen as quickly as the summer, maybe at the trade deadline in November, etc. So they're probably not going to rush to make drastic changes, if at all. Maybe this is just one of those things where somebody had to take the sword. Everything else is going to be business as usual. They're going to trust Kevin O'Connell to develop JJ McCarthy, and this thing looks like a better version of last year, as it very well could be, right? I think that's unrealistic in this day and age in sports. Generally, when you see this much smoke, there's going to be a little bit of fire behind it. And I'd expect some of the names I just threw out there to probably be at least in conversations for bubbles, for trades, et cetera, over the course of the next few weeks. So just one of those things I didn't see coming, but I think it's proof that these quarterback conversations that we BS back and forth on these pods, and certainly people do on television for hours and hours a day, they're just as hard inside these front offices. they're just as complicated, it's these people's lifeline, right? If you don't, you just said it. If you don't have the quarterback situation figured out, or at least stable and comfortable, it doesn't have to be all pro status, but stable and comfortable, you're on thin ice with your job, with your decision making, certainly with how you're spending your owner's money. So I do think that that's probably a leading contributing factor to where we are today. But I'm getting my popcorn ready for the next couple of moves out of Minnesota, because we'll see just how big of a change and a big of a course direction this Vikings team wants to take. And one more point to get in. It's not for nothing that the division around them just basically exploded, right? Detroit, big year in 24, Chicago, big year in 25, and Green Bay's been hanging around for 3 decades at the top of this division. So not for nothing that they are looking at the bottom of the division again and saying it's going to be really hard to get out with the current iteration of what we have and just how expensive that's going to be. All right, man, I'm putting this back on you because this is kind of breaking news that I've been a little too busy to get on top of, but the team without a city can't stop spending money, and that's your Athletics, Dan, who I know you've been talking about these core players, kind of quietly with me behind the scenes for quite a few years now. That it's nothing new. They develop well. They always have. They've been developing other people's pitchers for a long time, and it just so happens that they found themselves a core of position players to go with that now, and maybe they're a little bit low in what they can provide on the mound right now. And maybe they're a trade or two away from being actual contenders, but something legitimate is happening here, and it's happening while they're in Sacramento as they await their stadium in Vegas. They're kind of doing all the things that we want them to do, which is they're identifying their own talent, and instead of running them through pre-arbitration for 2 to 3 years and spending $2.5 million on a player and then dangling them out there for the big boys and the Goliaths to take advantage of, they want to come back and they want to keep these guys on pre-arb extensions and look a little bit like the Braves do and look a little bit like the Brewers do and some of these other teams that are living sort of in that middle market world and doing so with at least divisional contention on a yearly basis. Do you think that's where we're headed for this A's team, Dan?
Yeah, they're in such an interesting spot because we don't really know. I mean, we kind of throw them into this small market revenue sharing bucket, but I mean, I assume that's going to change as they head towards Vegas. So I typically like small market, low revenue teams to operate this exact way. I think this is really exciting because with the potential that they kind of take a next step forward as they transition to a new city. And what do I mean by that? A lot of these, I mean, this is the 4th early extension for impact players we've seen from the A's. So most of those, typically those deals pay guys in their early season, technically overpay those players in their early seasons, but typically those guys provide surplus value once they hit their arbitration and free agent year. So if these players kind of maintain their production level, these are going to be value contracts by the end of it, is what I'm trying to say. So if you layer that, these guarantees locked in that they already have right now, plus potential increases in spending as they head towards Vegas. This is going to be a really exciting lineup. I mean, it already is, but even in just a couple years, if they kind of add to this, it's going to be real exciting.
And here's the other side of this that maybe only our dumb little show here is thinking about. The way you laid that out is, of course, correct. And by the way, let's go through this quickly. Tyler Soderstrom, first baseman, he re-upped a couple of weeks ago at 7 years for $86 million. Jacob Wilson's the deal today. That's the shortstop at 7 for $70. Last year, it was Lawrence Butler, the outfielder, at 7 for $65.5, and DH / one of my favorite dudes in baseball, Brent Rooker, 5 years, $60 million. So, these aren't 3 to 4 year extensions. These are buyout control. Let's dangle in free agency a little bit and talk about maybe getting some value there as well. But you brought the construct that you laid out there, which is they're paying a little bit extra right now. They're not going to be able to get these guys on $850,000 like they've been doing for 3 decades and run that for 3 years. They're going to pay into the millions for the next couple of years. But when they get to ARB1, ARB2, ARB3, ARB4, whatever that's going to be, they're going to have money on the books. It's going to be cost controlled. Much of this could be built into a signing bonus, so they're cash plentiful down the road a little bit. And if they still want to act like the A's, Dan, and flip one of these players to one of the big boys, the Dodgers, the Phillies, whatever it's going to be, now these players are under contract with value. So there's not arbitration to go through. There's not some sort of adjudication that has to happen to try to ascertain, right? They're not competing with another team to figure out how much this player actually costs for this year, for next year, et cetera. It's already on the books. It's an established price point that they can now use as a negotiating tactic to go and get probably a better trade haul when it comes time to move a player or two from this list. So I think they've set themselves up for being a better version of the current A's and a better version of the old A's at the same time by extending these players early. And of course, these players are happy to do it because they're developing a core. It's not just a one-off. It's not just, one player getting paid because the league slapped them on the wrist and said, you got to spend some money or we're going to do something. It's now a core. They've got 4 to 5 to 6 contracts that are through into the 2030s. And that's unheard of for this franchise. So it's super exciting, but will it translate to winning? And how quickly can that happen, Dan?
Well, in the short term, it's hard to know because it's pretty clear they're going to have a hard time attracting pitching while they're in Sacramento. Yeah. They don't have pitching. They don't really have a lot of good internal options in terms of development. So I think that's going to be a struggle going forward in the short term. Once they move to Vegas, I mean, that's going to be, I don't want to act like it's a destination from like a part, just in terms of living situation, I'm sure it's not going to be the worst place to attract free agents, right? And I say that, like, I know Arizona is not Las Vegas, but the Diamondbacks in recent years have been in on some free agents that just seem to want to live there and go and are okay taking a nice guaranteed contract to play there. So I could see Vegas becoming a similar situation. So in the short term, I think they're going to be competitive with the lineup alone. The pitching, though, it's tough, right? And free agent wise, they're not going to attract anyone playing in, the Sacramento Heat in the middle of the day. Yeah, exactly. So,
there's a lot to like about the Vegas move, right? Tax-free situations for free agents, obviously a more pitcher-friendly ballpark based on some of the dimensions we've seen. And by the way, now a young core position player is under contract to carry into that brand new stadium with. That should help, right? Those are 3 pretty good ingredients for a good situation for them.
Agreed. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, last point on this. Astros at least have plateaued a little bit here. They're not perennial American League favorites. Let's put it that way. There's been a bunch of teams that have jumped ahead of them over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. Angels are still buried in purgatory. Rangers took a huge step back after their sort of blip World Series year. Mariners are there. They're contenders, and they look like a richer version of what this A's program is starting to become. But the point is, this division might be at its weakest point in a long time. And maybe that's a part of this conversation as well, too, is, hey, I realize the Sacramento stuff blows. I realize we've got our ace right now is a pitcher that probably doesn't want to be here, and Luis Severino. But other than that, we got a bunch of kids that love each other, are having a ton of fun. We can certainly add Nick Kurtz into that conversation, the rookie of the year, and one of the fantasy darlings heading into 2026 here, who could be next on this list, by the way, if the cards are going properly with these early extensions. And you have to like about where the next 72 months are, if you're not super thrilled yet about where they are over the next 10 to 12.
Yeah, agreed. I just, in the short term, it's like hard to, you got a rookie of the year performance basically 2 years in a row from Kurtz and Wilson. I mean, is that going to repeat? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think they're both phenomenal young players, but like, it's just hard to, pencil in, 40 home
But don't
runs
you think this
on an
helps?
annual basis from a.
Don't you think the consistency of having the contracts on the books helps the mindset of stepping into spring training right now? Because I have to imagine playing on teams like this in Pittsburgh and some of these smaller teams that they just haven't been multi-year contract organizations. You know what I mean? They just haven't. For whatever reason, I'm not going to kill them. I'm not going to do anything with that. But the year-to-year stuff where 80% of your roster is different every single year, that's got to really be a grind, unless you're miserable and you're hoping for a whole new slate of people every year, I guess. But it's got to be a grind. Having some consistency and knowing, hey, these guys could be here for another half decade based on what their contracts now look like. That's new for this organization in that regard. And I wonder if, some of the blips on the radar, like a Kurtz season or a Wilson season, will look a little better, will smooth out a little bit more over the course of the next few years because of what these contracts represent, which is continuity.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Last thing. This one came up today. I wanted to make sure we were both aware of it. We continue to learn new things. That's the whole part of this process. And I have a feeling there's not a lot of people even attached to the game that were aware that some of this stuff goes down. But I shot you a really great piece regarding Cody Bellinger's new contract with the Yankees and why some of these player opt-outs are making a difference now. We've been begging for some order and some logic to come to the deferred compensation and things like that. And you and I have struggled. I know you specifically with some of the international players where you have to calculate the posting fee based on the guaranteed money that's been added to a foreign professional player. And what do we do if there's a player opt-out after year 2 and year 3? And is that truly guaranteed money if he can leave it on the table? So then how does that then go back and change what the posting fee was? Well, the same conversation somewhat applies to these veteran free agent contracts, specifically Bellinger, who signed a 5-year, $162.5 million contract to return to the Yankees, which on the surface is $32.5 million a year. So that logic, thousands of baseball contracts before it would say that's the tax salary, that's the going rate, that's the AAV that the Yankees have to account for over the course of the next 5 seasons, except there's a double opt-out situation here. After year 2 and after year 3, Bellinger can punt on this contract and get himself back to free agency. And what we've learned, Dan, is that the tax gods don't just say, we'll figure it out when we get there. They don't retroactively account for the possibility. They bake it into the cake up front. It's part of the ingredients. And what I mean by that is instead of 32.5 flat, Bellinger now counts for over 40 million. In fact, 42.5 over the course of the next 2 seasons for the Yankees. And then those figures will drop to 23.3 and 23.4 respectively over the course of the next 3 after that, if he remains in the contract. So the Yankees have to front load his tax salaries, okay, at 42.5, which is a huge number. I mean, just a massive number. And then if he opts in, they get some relief. So they're back into the low 20s with him. But if he's opting in, he's probably an average player at that point in time, right? So you can kind of understand the logic with it. But basically, we're not going to let the Yankees basically take a $10 million haircut on the tax over the next 2 years, respectively, just because they built in a player option in year 3. This is really smart stuff. This is really, really important stuff that this kind of logic, I think, are the conversations that have to be brought into the CBA discussions. Where else can we do this specifically to knock the big guys down just a hair, right? Just to make life a little bit harder on the big guy so that they can't go and throw a 10-year contract in there at $400 million. But instead of a $40 million tax salary, they were looking to get it at 33 because of deferrals and all these opt-outs and things like that. Well, this counters that. If they want to get fancy with some decisions and give the players the control, they're going to pay for it on a tax basis. Where are you with this? Is this does this make perfect sense to you? Does this clear some things up for you? Because I know you've been going back and forth on some of these scenarios in the past. How do you feel about $42.5 million Cody Bellinger for the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, number one on the Yankees, who have Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge is $40 million for for comparison's sake. So I like that this is a thing. I admittedly had never heard of it, so this was definitely news and a learning experience for us. I'm still kind of thinking through all of the if-thens that come along with it.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay with this is how it's operating, right? I guess that's the question is like should the Yankees who I mean, let me step back. I personally don't care, but should the Yankees have to pay more up front like this who are, they're already over the luxury tax, so this is going to be a significant chunk that they committed to whether it is a 1-year deal or not. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. Do you have any questions?
No,
Any qualms
I think
about
it's
it?
great. I think it's great. Here's my one concern with it is the Yankees are paying for the player getting control. And if that becomes the case, if that becomes a thing, players are going to have less control. It's just how it works. Okay. Once owners realize that the players have them on something here, they're going to start to get rid of it, which will probably relinquish some of the team's control. So we'll see how that works out. But this is one of those rules, Dan, we're gonna have to dive into a little bit more. There's actually a name for it. It's called the Valley Charge. I don't know if you read that portion of the piece, but it's a rare exception that's in the CBA that has been bargained by both sides here collectively. So it's a real deal. But because he's got those double opt-outs, they have to take on this amount of tax up front. And we'll see. If this becomes a thing, if this becomes a way because I'm thinking about this in the converse now, right? Is this going to be a way that Steve Cohen wins some of these battles, some of these free agent battles? Because he doesn't care about what his tax bill is. He just doesn't. He's made that very clear on plenty of channels. But if this is a way that he can make other teams stop, right, and make them pull back from an offer, I think he will use this as a tactic. So it could conversely work in some of the bigger teams' favors if there's just no limit to what their capabilities are. But I do like the fact that there's accountability. I'll leave it at that. I hope this comes to more monikers in the system, especially the tax salaries that involve deferred compensation. And just to get out of here quickly, it does make Bellinger for 2026 the 4th highest tax salary in all of baseball. So that would be Kyle Tucker, believe it or not, Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Cody Bellinger, and then Bo Bichette with the Mets on an inflated situation where he has an opt-out after year 1. So we'll see. We'll see where this gets us. But I sure hope the Yankees were aware of this because this is a $12.5 million tax increase to the New York Yankees for 2026, which, if I quickly flip and look, brings them up to a projected 336, still 50 million behind the Mets, still 80 million behind the Dodgers, but they are currently due to owe a tax bill of 76 million, which means a total combined payroll of 413 million for the Yankees. We now have 3 teams projected to have to pay over 400 million to their roster in 2026. So the baseball is broken people are having more and more reasons to be loud right now, and we'll see where that gets us on December 1st.
It's when the way you laid it out too.
I know it's tough. It's tough to justify it.
And it's crazy that Bellinger and all these Bellinger got this deal. I mean, that was a real sweetheart deal for a player of his age and stature.
Yeah.
So the fact he keeps getting the leverage in all these deals is impressive. And I think, again, we alluded to this last time we spoke, but I think it does it does offer some signal as to what might be coming with the new CBA, where
Yeah.
teams are trying to get these deals in regardless of how much the price tag is up front. So,
Okay, ready? One last question. We'll get you out of here because I'm sitting here staring at this tax table right now, and it's been updated based on some of these new deals. By the way, the Athletics are 19th for those playing at home. I'm going to look after I get off this thing. I'm going to guess that's their highest in a decade, but that's where they currently project 19th tax payrolls in Major League Baseball. There in the teens. I'm going to give you the top 10, and I want you to rank one or two teams that should not be taxpayers. Okay, because all 10 right now are in the tax according to our projections. Okay, Dodgers, Mets, Yankees, Phillies, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Padres, Braves, Cubs, Astros. Who should not be a taxpayer in 2026, Dan?
I think the Padres are, for like reasons we've already talked about with ownership and revenue issues, like that's going to be a team I think will be motivated to try and get under that number. I just don't realistically know how they do it with the contracts they have on the books now. Now the Darvish thing is going to come into play here to some degree.
That's bad news for them.
I mean, from like a roster construction standpoint, that's granted, they have big time players that they're paying large sums of money to. I understand that, but I mean, they're going to struggle to stay relevant in that division, I think. And it'll hurt doubly if you're over the threshold as right now a second time payer for them.
The next five are the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Rangers, the Angels, and the Tigers. If you had to pick one of those teams that you believe should aggressively become a taxpayer in 2026 because they have a chance to go deep, who is it?
I'm still on board with Texas. I like what they've done. I think they still have a really good, promising young roster. We've seen it before. I mean, I I step on them every offseason. I have a feeling once I start digging in a little more, I'm going to like the Angels' moves better than anticipated. Not that I think that they're a contender, but if they're close, we've seen them kind of push some chips in and go for it. So it wouldn't totally surprise me if a few months in they were looking at this thing and decided to add revenue or add payroll. I don't think that would shock me, but I'm still at the early stages. The next group of teams nobody really stands out to me as teams that would be trying to increase right now. Maybe the Giants, if you want to do that, but I think they're
been
kind
burned too many times before, right?
Yeah. And they're sort of still feeling out their roster, their young players, et cetera. So,
new coach. There's a lot of reasons to pause a little bit there and let things matriculate. All right. I appreciate the emergency pod here. We had a lot of things kind of come down the Friday news chunket, and it was good to get to it. We'll see where we stand for the weekend, and then maybe we'll do some Super Bowl stuff next week together and wrap up some of this baseball stuff because I believe teams are like packed and ready to go to Florida here. That's what I'm reading on some of the socials. So it's time to dive into some zips and some projected win totals and all that fun stuff and see where we stand with some of these baseball teams.
Yeah, everything's fast forwarded because of the World Baseball Classic season, which is going to trickle into spring training stuff too. I think I already heard Max Muncy from the Dodgers speak on how everybody is kind of coming into camp not ramped up, whereas we've really heard over the last like half decade here these players showing up to camp basically ready to rip from the start. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of that kind of shakes out between the WBC, a little bit different of a spring training schedule, timeline, etc. So, we'll see how it all plays out.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.